individual sites for all that?
Well, you could. So the first thing you encounter with that is how do we get the engines around that?
Right.
So if you've created global XML sitemaps and you have all the pages being indexed individually by country, then that's fine because the engines are going to bounce against it and not get in, but you need to get them around it. What happens with that is when you set that global sitemap and you pick it, it typically sets a cookie. Make sure that when it tries to set that cookie, it allows people not to accept the cookie. Like Google, Yahoo, Bing, they'll never accept the cookie. So the only way they'll ever do is bang against the US version of the site. So you've got to feed that in some other way.
Yeah, you mentioned Advanced Web Rank is using geolocation, and you said another one that I guess
Agent WebRank. It's a French company.
Okay. And translation services. A lot of the stuff you talked about is pretty much SEO 101 just spread across the world. The problem that I've encountered in the past is with translation. Do you have any suggestions as far as vendors, where to go, where to look, what's going to, because, I mean, the constant examples of looking like a fool in another language,
Right.
when you use any sort of machine translation.
Well, one recommendation, don't use, well, we got to be careful with machine translation because a lot of companies will use machine translation with human editing. So most of your big localization houses, that's what they'll use, and then they use humans to clean it up. The big one is garbage in, garbage out. So if you've got a web page that really doesn't tell your story in English, you translate that to another language, it doesn't tell your story. I would make sure that the source content they're using is as clean as possible. Make sure that's optimized. And then give them the general SEO rules. The other thing is I'd ask the credentials of the actual translator. Do they understand business? There's a lot of people who don't know web language. How to even write the phrase email. There's a lot of people, it's getting harder to find now that don't even shop online, let alone know how to write for online. So those are things you want to look at. And then I would have someone in that local market make sure that they review it when it's done, just to see how bad it is. So again, there's no substitution for cheap translation. And you've got to get good stuff. And you've got to invest in it. Think if you were setting up an actual sales channel in that market, what would it cost? We get sort of lazy with the web. So, I definitely research your source after that.
Let's say you have a small to medium-sized company who sells a very esoteric product. They don't have a lot of resources for translation. Would it be sufficient if they had a sales rep, for example, in China, to have that sales rep prepare one page in Chinese to introduce the company, say what they sell, and provide his name and phone number and email?
Sure, that's a great start. Especially now that you've got someone in the local market because they can email that person. They can communicate with the locals. So start with one page, then go to 2 pages, go to 3 pages.
And put that page at /CN on the website.
Absolutely. Have it the home. I like it when people have a little more than 1 page. But look at your bounce rate and see, do they pass through? Do they sort of spread out into the other markets? But definitely start with 1 as another way to test it. Put it on / whatever. See what happens with it. If people start complaining that that's all they got, maybe have unique information about how to buy or how to buy the local partner. Any of that is better than nothing in a market. I guess going over here, yeah.
You touched on it earlier, but Google, the issues or advantages with Google Translate.
The advantage is it's cheap. It's pretty much free. I think it's getting better. I don't think it handles Asian languages well at all. They're investing millions of dollars to make it work. I think it is a quick way to get content, but have a human edit it. If you want to rip through. The other problem is that I see people doing is they use that link on their page, click this and it's for my Korean page, and they want that to be ranked. But it's actually a page that's on Google that doesn't really exist. But they're saying, no, I have a site that's in Korean. And there's 80 pages, and you just click these buttons and it creates my Chinese or my Korean page. So the quality is better in European languages than it is in Asian languages. I just would never trust it for business unless some human went back and edited it after that. And I would never use it as my the link that spawns the page, I would never use that because you'll never ever rank for that. They just won't include that page.
That was part
Those
of
are
the-
two big barriers.
That was part of my question. Could you use that page that's created to get ranked in the local market by putting it on proxy?
Not the one that's spawned, that's, I don't know what the other non-technical word, the word that comes
Dynamic
up,
page.
Generated.
that's generated when you click the link.
Right.
Now, someone asked me this earlier, yes, you could take that page and painfully scrape the content out of the source and put it in. You just can't right-click and save the page, because they've got code in there that made that page exist. You could strip that language version out and drop it into your page. You could do that. But, it's just as easy to, have a translator
Yeah.
sort of do that cut and paste for you, because especially with double byte characters, when you start to cut it, if you don't cut it exactly right, you'll be splitting characters. But it's, again, your example, you're a small guy, you want to try it out, it's the easiest thing to do than some off-the-shelf translation tool. So I would definitely use Google over some other translation tool, and then when possible, when you can, have some human look at it and make edits to it. So there's one.
I actually have a suggestion for this gentleman over here who's looking for good translators. A lot of my clients, I've had a few that needed those types of services, and it was easier for me to get somebody, if you're in the New England area, somebody from Yale or something to write for you. I've had great luck with that. Just using Craigslist, and you know what, you pay a little bit more money, but you're gonna make out better, because my clients were all very satisfied afterwards, because you're not using a translator. I wouldn't even consider using a translator ever. I would always go for a human.
You can go to international, students. I mean, there's a problem because a lot of them aren't allowed to work.
Yes.
So, but whatever you work out is your deal. Same thing, go to linguistic department at schools. You'll often find people trying to make extra cash. They know the language, they may not know business. That's one of the things you have to think about, is have someone in your market review it. Translations.com, they're starting to get into some of the search and in language side of this. Again, anybody that's doing that is probably at a premium. So again, however you get local content, make sure someone, a business partner or someone you trust that's fluent in that native language, make sure they look at it for tone and messaging and all those type of things.
Could you talk a little bit maybe about Canada and maybe Quebec?
Yeah, Canada is a big issue, because in Canada, most sites, especially an official site and a government site and a business in Canada, it has to be in both languages. And that's always been a problem, where which one do you put up first, the French version, or do you put up the English version? The one thing to do there is make sure you use those language tags for CAFR, which is Canadian French. Then it can detect that it's actually the French. The interesting thing is, you have the same problem in Canada that we have anywhere else, is that you should have it on a .ca, and then it can, your directory can be, or a .com CA_FR for the French version, and then CA_EN or just EN for the English version. And same challenge here. You've either got to commit to Canada or you got to commit to the US. So a .ca or a .com/CA that's flagged for Canada will show up in the Canadian. That's probably the second biggest market where people are getting hit, is in Canada with these English language sites, because they are putting on the locals. So that's what I would do, is create both versions, make sure you're identifying it as Canadian French, Canadian English, and then set that geolocation inside Webmaster Tool and push it exclusively for Canada. The border isn't open anymore in terms of Google's, local IP. Did that answer? Was that helpful at all?
Yeah, it was. I remember a thing a long time ago where even Quebec had like laws against websites being more than 30% English or something.
Yeah, if you were, that was the thing that a bunch of American speakers got in trouble for, speaking at a search conference in Toronto, is saying, pick one of them and do this, and right away, some person from the government, the Quebec government, stood up and said, I'm going to tell you all right now, this is wrong. Do not listen to anything else these guys say. I'm from the government. This is the law. So it embarrassed like 6 people that didn't know. But it is like that. I think it's actually got to be more, I forget what the ratio is, but it is a law, especially if you're a Quebec company. You have to follow it. I don't think all Canada has to do it anymore, But definitely, if you're a Quebec-based company, you have to have, equal time, French and English. Okay? I think that's it. So I'll be around for a bit if you have any additional questions. You have my email address, or shoot me an email if you have any others. And thank you very much.